let's talk now about just the general practice of real estate. First, let's talk about the federal fair housing laws. When we talk about fair housing laws, you kind of need to know, for your test, the history of the fair housing laws. History starts with the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which prohibited any type of discrimination based on race. The Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 prohibited discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, and national origin. Then in 1974, we added sex to the list of protected classes. Then in 1988, the Fair Housing Amendments Act added handicap and familial status to the classes protected under the Federal Fair Housing Act. Now, familial status protects pregnant women and families with children. Familial status does not apply to retirement communities in which 80% of the units are occupied by residents age 55 and older. The handicap and disability protection applies to those who have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Alcoholics and drug addicts are protected if they are seeking treatment. They are not protected if they are using illegal substances. This law specifically excludes those convicted of dealing drugs. Landlords must allow disabled tenants to make changes to a unit to accommodate a disability at the tenant's expense. The federal fair housing laws also prohibit discrimination against individuals because of their association with persons in the protected classes. To remember the protected classes in the federal fair housing laws, use the memory aid fresh corn and ignore the vowels. F for familial status, R for race, S for sex, H for handicap, C for color, R for religion, and N for national origin. Fresh corn, familial status, race, sex, handicap, color, religion, and national origin. Non-protected classes under the fair housing laws. Age is not a protected class under the federal fair housing laws. Sexual orientation is not a protected class, not an expressly protected class under the federal fair housing laws. Marital status is not a protected class under the federal fair housing laws, and occupation is not a protected class under the federal fair housing laws. Under the federal fair housing laws, there's a few types of prohibited conduct that you will be tested on. The first type of prohibited conduct is redlining. Redlining is the practice of refusing to make mortgage loans or issue insurance policies in specific areas or neighborhoods because of the nature of the area and or the protected classes who live there. This is something lenders used to do, redlining. Redlining is done for reasons other than the economic qualifications of the applicants. In other words, they refuse to give the loan because of the specific areas or neighborhoods because of the nature of the area. Blockbusting, sometimes called panic peddling or panic selling. Blockbusting is when a licensee knocks on the door and says, "Hey, owner, I want to encourage you to sell your home now because protected classes are moving into the neighborhood and that will have a negative impact on your property value." That's blockbusting, not good. Steering is another illegal practice, and it's prohibited under the federal fair housing laws. Steering occurs when a licensee attempts to steer or channel potential homebuyers to particular neighborhoods, or discourage them from considering some areas based on protected classes of the people who live there. Now, there are some exceptions to the federal fair housing laws, but there are never exceptions with regard to racial discrimination. The only real exception that you need to take note of and remember is for senior housing. Senior housing may discriminate against potential residents, on the basis of familial status or families with children. Now, there's two types of senior housing that you need to be aware of. The first type is like the retirement communities, like Rossmore Leisure World or Sun City. That is communities where at least 80% of the occupants are age 55 or older. That's the first type. The second type would be more like an assisted living home. And that type, the housing is restricted to 100% of the occupants must be age 62 or older. So 2 types of senior housing. The first would be like retirement communities. 80% of the occupants must be age 55 or older. And the second type would be like assisted living centers, where 100% of the occupants must be age 62 or older. Now, with the federal fair housing laws, there are some things that you need to keep in mind about your advertising. In the sale or rental of real property, no advertisement may include language indicating either a preference or a limitation based on any of the protected classes. So you want to watch how you write your advertising. Now, when it comes to enforcement and penalties for the federal fair housing laws, you need to remember it is HUD that enforces the federal fair housing laws. HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And HUD establishes rules and regulations to further clarify the law. That's what they do. One of their big requirements is the equal opportunity poster. They require that poster for businesses, including real estate brokerage firms or any other firm that deals with housing. Now, when HUD engages in their enforcement responsibilities, they will first investigate all incidents of wrongdoing. If a party feels like they are wronged or feels like someone made a fair housing violation against them, that party can make the complaint to HUD within 1 year of the alleged act of discrimination. In a complaint investigation, HUD will consider whether the equal opportunity poster is displayed. Now, when they investigate, HUD will never consider the licensee's intentions. Those are immaterial. Even if the licensee felt they were working in the client's best interest, if the outcome was discriminatory, then HUD would find the licensee in violation. An example of such discriminatory action might be only showing a family with children homes in neighborhoods with other children. Violations of the federal fair housing laws could involve financial penalties. An aggrieved party, a person who feels like they were wronged, may file a civil action, that's in court now, a civil action directly in federal court within 2 years of the alleged act of discrimination. So the aggrieved party has 1 year to file a complaint with HUD and 2 years to file a court action. So what is a broker's best protection from either a lawsuit or a complaint? The best way a broker can protect himself is to keep good records. I once heard a lawyer tell me, documents win cases. Keep good records. That's a broker's best protection.